We have our panel session now, so I'd like to actually bring Amy and Fran back onto stage. Sorry, you don't get a break. And I would also like to introduce you to Sarah Thompson from Skipton Building Society, Helene Veny from HSBC, and Emma Newton from emovis. And, yeah, please take a seat. And I would also, I can't believe this is brilliant. If you've been hiding under a rock, you won't have seen Get Out a Rap. So this is Martin Teasdale. He is the amazing podcaster from Get Out a Rap.
He's only saying that because he was a guest. What a great panel. And I'm more nervous doing this now than I've done the previous 104 episodes. But what a great panel. And the title of this debate, or this chat, is Putting People First. And we're a people-based industry. We all love people. As James said, it's great to be back seeing people face-to-face and hugging. James said he got a lot of hugs. I actually saw him just going up to random people and hugging them. So I'm not sure if that's technically correct. It's great to be working right now at a time when technology's never been better and it's never been more accessible. So let's start. How do you join the two? So how do you keep people first and utilize and enable technology to make the people better and to make the service that we provide better? And maybe we should start with the first kind of process that you go through in a contact center where the two meet, and that is an RFP. So, James, I imagine you receive a lot of RFPs.
Yep.
How prevalent are people in RFPs? At the top?
Well, so the commonality that we see in RFPs, and it's not necessarily a criticism, I understand it, is people ask for features and capabilities. So I need messaging, voicemail, I need email, I need web chat. That's what we tend to see. But the DNA of the best organizations are the ones who provide us data and insight about the things that they're trying to achieve and the challenges that they're trying to solve, and allow us to help them solve those challenges. That's the DNA of the best organizations, the ones who win the awards, a lot of them up here, this way.
And how can people, because I imagine there's people in the room that might be putting RFPs together, how should they look? Well, Fran, you've just talked about a digital transformation. Mm-hmm. How were your RFPs structured? What did you do to...
I'll give you an example. We would always include the people, the stakeholders, and the people who maybe talk to the customer if it's specific. And a great example is knowledge is very important to us. We've just introduced a knowledge retention tool called Clever Nelly. We actually brought the people in, the associates themselves, to actually, as part of the demo, and to decide whether it's something they thought they would like before we even went forward with it. And I think that's really important. I think the worst thing you can do is get something and say, here's one we made earlier, and give it to people. You've got to involve the stakeholders all the way through, and it makes it a real success. And it makes it quicker as well.
Are there any tips that you'd share about some of the things to include?
I don't know around that. So I would say it depends what the RFP is on. So if you give me an example, so that particular one, it would be about usability, user experience, customer experience, how's it going to play back, speed of knowledge, making sure that they got their responses, that type of thing. So I think I would look at what was I trying to achieve, what was my sort of desired outcome, and then I would look at what were the sort of key measures of success, and that's how I'd measure it. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Now, once you've gone through the RFP process and you're starting your digital transformation, how do you bring people with you? And Helene, if I can come to you, you've just undergone this at HSBC. How did you bring people with you?
Sure. So I've started as a kind of more project manager type of role within the bank, and since the start, to be fair, when we even are the ideation part of the project, when we start to think about, we have a problem statement, what's the solution that we are going to deliver, we kind of challenge our problem statement with frontline people that can be contact center, relationship managers, to ensure that we get it right at this stage of the process. Then if we kind of agree and want to go further ahead in delivering this kind of AI-based capability, whatever it can be, this is where we will ensure that as part of the stakeholder roadmap that we have for the project or the delivery, we will have always people from the contact center included. I think it sounds basic, but to be fair, in the end, to kind of always have like real people from the ground helping us in shaping the project and making sure it happens, it really helps so much further down the line when we end up in kind of starting thinking about what internal, external communication we are going to do, what are the change and implementation, training, etc. When people have been onboarded in the beginning, they have the good word to talk to their own team to help us and deliver the capability in the end. Yeah.
That's great. Now,
so, yeah, that will be the good thing in terms of like project-related, ensuring that we have people from the beginning helping you and being part of the project delivery, but then also post go live when we move to BAU. Obviously, we kind of always check in or try to always have someone checking in with the team to ensure that what has been delivered is still making sense, is still optimum, is still bring them some benefit. Otherwise, you just lose, you've delivered something, it has been good, up and running for like a year, and then, we just lost all the good effort that has been done. So there is a kind of also BAU part that is really key to onboard.
Thank you very much. For all of you, really, when it comes to putting people first, what are the common themes and considerations the audience should take into account? Now, I know you're all very passionate about people. I'm looking at you, Sarah.
I think the most important thing for me is making sure that you do have a true spread of your colleagues in the contact center, for example, that will be using this product. Because I recently had an anecdote from a dear friend on LinkedIn who was telling me about how it was quite a small contact center, but they got 3 people to come from the contact center in order to sort of have that agent view. Now, the problem is that it was 3 different areas, and the 3 participants were all 3 middle-aged women, and the rest of the contact center was quite a lot younger. So we had a very, very narrow view. So that would be my point, and it links in with the diversity conversation we had earlier. You can't just take a snapshot of people. We need to get better views. We need to get more opinions, and we need to make sure we're getting a true representation of the contact center.
Would people's answer to that be, well, we survey our people all the time?
Well, unless you're doing it almost every day, I think the data with that can be really flawed. One of the most effective ways I've seen of measuring employees' satisfaction isn't these big one-off surveys. It's actually at British Gas when I worked there. On our homepage, we had a smiley face and a sad face. And it's so simple, but you can use that kind of data to see, well, hang on a minute, call volumes are really high that day. Oh, hang on, the smiley face is gone. You can make those kind of connections, and it's really simple, but it's that kind of information that's a lot more realistic to use. And again, surveys have their place, but at the end of the day, unless you're doing it regularly, there's no quantitative data there, as you guys mentioned earlier. So how can you really take qualitative information and turn it into something tangible or something measurable?
And I think we all exist in an environment where change is happening all the time. So how surveys can stay relevant and in the moment is quite difficult. And I know beforehand we were talking, Emma, about surveys and the challenges that you face, but Emovis have won countless of awards and they're all people-based. So what's the secret?
Well, I think the secret, quite simply, is our people. And not a lot of people are going to like what I'm going to say now, but basically, the customer's not important. Your people are your asset. You make your people happy, they're going to, in turn, service your customers and make them happy. And whilst I agree, yes, in some instances, employee surveys can be a little outdated, I think the content, and it's what we do with those results when we come through. So I joined Emovis last year, we just ran the first survey, we hit 78% of people completed it, brilliant. Tumbleweed moment, what do we do with it? Nothing. Right, excellent, really worth that, well done. We ran it again at Christmas. Again, we hit 78%. Amazing. No better, no worse. But what are we doing now? We're engaging with our teams. We're going out to our managers. We're going out to our customer service representatives, our agents, and saying, you said this. What do you want us to change? How can we make this a better place for you to come and work? And whilst, no, we can't do every change that everybody puts in, we can certainly go back and say, yeah, do you know what? You said this, we did this. And that's what it's about. It's about keeping those people engaged. You know, we're winning awards for the best employer, great place to work, contact centre support teams, everything that's on there. And we do the silly stuff as well. And it's about getting people off the phones and engaging. You know, we've got great personalities that work in our contact centres, and our team managers and our operations managers are fantastic at bringing out really unusual games to play during the day. One of them we did recently was the Quid games. Yeah, I'm sure you've all heard of the great Netflix thing on there. So if anybody wants to go onto our page, you're more than welcome to have a look at the great feedback we got from there. But what we're also doing now, we're moving with technology as well. So it's great to speak with Helene today because we're just in the process of implementing a new HR system. Yep, dead boring to you guys. It's amazing to me. I'm so exciting. But part of that is moving with what we've got feedback from our employee survey. They're wanting to be more innovative. They're not wanting just to go on and we can change our address, but we've got to do it when we're in work. No, we want that app. We want to be sat on that bus or going to the pub or meeting our friends, or I've moved address, I've changed my bank details. It's now all going to be app-based. It's engagement, and that's what's the forefront of Emovis. It's the people, it's listening, and it's implementation. Don't just do a survey, don't just put out any bit of technology and not include your people unless you're going to follow up and be able to say, you said, we did.
I was going to add. Oh, sorry. I was going to add on that. I think it leads back to user experience as well, isn't it? So, to your point, we've got an app that they use for when they go home, booking their holidays, booking their shifts, doing everything like that. And there's no point us designing it and saying, here you are. If they're young and they want to use it in a certain way, they've got to be involved in that design. And likewise with our bit credit, that's for the younger market. You know, we can't be designing it. If we're a lot older, they need to be in there, involved, designing it, and really understanding the user experience that people want, I think, and that's what's so key.
So I just had a question to Emma Emovis, because could you just say a few words about your CEO and how he interacts with the people? Because I think this is really important.
Yeah, so our CEO is absolutely one of a kind. I've worked in HR now for quite a few years. I'm not going to say too many because I've had my Botox done, so obviously I look beautiful. And you'd never guess that amount of years. But Neil Conway is our CEO here at Emovis in the UK. Neil, in all the time I've worked there, which is just short of a year now, I've only ever seen his door closed once, okay? Every day, whether he's in our Leeds site, our Mersey site, he walks around all of our customer service representatives and talks to each one individually. And you will hear him. It's not just I must do it because that's what I should do. He'll be asking people about the family. Oh my God, did you see the football score at the weekend? It's about doing that. And the other great thing that he does, whereas, you know, we all look at saving money and trying to pull money in, he does everything that he can to spend whatever we make during that year back into our people. For example, we have hospitality tickets for a football team, Leeds United. I know, don't say anything. And what we do, we give them to our staff. We raffle them out. And he does that. And he makes Emovis a great place to work. And he is fantastic. You can go in, you can ask him anything. He does regular town halls. Anybody who has the birthday in that month, we all get, well, obviously now we got rid of COVID, we get all pizza in and we all stand round and they will sat there and they will say to him, do you know what, Neil, I don't agree with what you said last week. All right, okay, let's have a conversation about it. And the one thing we have to do with Neil, though, is rein him in a bit, because he goes a little bit ahead and agrees to everything, which is like that, no. So from a HR point of view, it's a logistical nightmare, but we could not ask for a better leader to drive and engage our people moving forward.
When it comes to leadership as well, how important are team leaders in this picture of putting people first?
I'd say essential.
Massively.
Yeah, I think if you don't have good leaders, then, I mean, team leaders particularly, they're your eyes and ears on the floor. You know, they are seeing things that we can't see. And having those skills, I mean, all of our leaders at Skipton now, mental health first aid, are trained And I think that's brilliant, especially with the pandemic and the things that Amy covered earlier. We've really found that supportive, and the great thing about that is that we do find that it helps our advisors because they feel like they have a safe space to speak to. What I challenge people to say is that should it just be the leaders? Because the team leaders are your easy ones. Oh, they see people every day. What about your service analysts? What about your real-time analysts, your guys who are doing schedules? Well, it's very easy. I'm sure any of you guys have done it before. It's very easy to sit there and go, oh, that person's just being lazy. Or, oh, hang on, that person's done 4 late shifts in a week. Oh, it'll be fine, it works. But in reality, you've got to get them to think empathetically. You've got to get them to think about the people they're scheduling for, because they are people. And same with real time. Oh, that person's 5 minutes in wrap. Well, maybe that person's struggling. You know, maybe that person is in a really complex query. So yes, I think team leaders are really important here, but let's not forget that it's not just those people that deal with our advisors. It's a whole wider net. So let's make it more like you guys. Let's get everybody involved. I love that. I think it's brilliant.
Now, given the name of today is Disrupt, and we all have focus on people, and there's great stories, and if you're ever involved in awards, you just hear some fantastic examples of putting people first. How is it, and this isn't to say an arbitrary position one way or the other, but how is it that we hear, Amy, some of the stats that you shared, and I think we see it in our own centres, that not just because we're all living through historical events, it would be nice to not live through them. No, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So how is it that we have this focus, we've never had better technology, yet we are still seeing some of the stats that you shared, Amy?
I mean, ultimately, we're complex human beings and we don't like change. So even if we know something's good for us, it still takes time to adjust our behavior, to adjust our attitudes. And it's also why the leadership and the management and the day-to-day conversations and activities are so important, because it starts to just create something that's new and real. But our brains literally resist change at every step. If you think about even, if you try to do something for yourself like lose weight, get fit, you have the knowledge, you're aware that it's good for you, but you'll still be binging on your takeaway or skipping that gym session that you want to do because it's hard to do something differently. And there's some amazing stories and progress now, which is, I think, what we need to really focus on. And there's a lot of challenges. But it is around just not boiling the ocean, actually. It's about taking those steps that are very tangible, very real, that make a difference, top to bottom, all the way from the CEO, all the way down to the person who's just joined and is junior, starting their career. And it's making it real. So it takes time, but equally, you can be bold and you can make fundamental change quite quickly if you have the right backing and the right support. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but change is hard, but you have to kind of do it top to bottom and make it very real for it to work.
Thank you. I think it does, and I think events like today and just educating ourselves and sharing best practice and actually holding ourselves to account and saying, are we really putting people first? I love something you shared around, we've never looked at shift patterns for so long. It's not technology that's stopping us doing that. It's not customer demand, yet we're still asking people to work exactly the same shifts when we know through science that probably that isn't good for people. That leads to burnout. So how can technology help even further?
Well, it still astounds me in an industry where we're seeing mass attrition and difficult to attract, as we talked about, that shift patterns haven't changed. We are operating in a more complex world. Customers are more sophisticated than they've ever been. So conversations are going to be more difficult. The mental load for advisors is going to be more challenging. Yet, I speak to a lot of organisations who, they don't have bonus break. The concept of a bonus break when somebody is, feeling like they just can't cope anymore. It just makes no sense to me. And very nice, whatever WFM platforms you've got, they're all capable of building in different shift patterns, bonus breaks, these sorts of things. And it doesn't take a lot to just spend a bit of time to look at that. Sarah is obviously very close to that sort of stuff. But one tip I would give, especially with the pandemic and remote working and hybrid working and those sorts of things, platforms like Variant, like Nice, like Calabrio, whatever you might have, one tip I would give you is actually you can configure them so you can see the difference in performance and outcomes of people compared to home workers versus hybrid workers versus in the office workers. So I would turn some of that technology on, really give you that insight to understand what impact that has on people.
I was going to say, I also think the whole new way of working is just brilliant for bringing in different types of shifts. So we're looking at split shifts. So if you need people in the morning and the evening, you're not going to bring them into an office and then tell them to go home and bring them back. But you could actually have people log on. It's like, I know NHS Digital years ago used to do this, where they'd get people, they would log on when they needed them. But you could actually have people who could log on, take the kids to school, log on later, and actually it really suits their life. And we're looking at student shifts, like where people, they only want to do so many evenings and one weekend, but they can do that from home. They don't have to be coming in. We'll try and get them in once a month to just, get them embedded into the culture. But it's brilliant. It gives you so much more flexibility. But yet we still try and carry on with the same old permanent part-time, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and just my final thought just on that is, so there's so much possible with technology, which is incredible, and all of that is possible through technology to make it remote and possible. But actually, sometimes I think we over-invest in thinking purely from technology rather than actually the problem, the opportunity, thinking differently to how it's been done before, to then reapply technology to that problem. And platforms today, there's a whole host of things that you can do. That your context, your challenges, your needs are direct to your situation. So I would actually shift the focus to say tech is the enabler, but think about what it's enabling and then work from that to kind of fit it. So.
And I think that comes full circle to where we started around RFPs. I think if anyone's worked in operations, you've probably had the moment I was sharing with James. I was managing an outbound team, and the director came onto the sales floor, which was kind of unknown. Everyone was like, uh-oh, what's happening? Tapped me on the shoulder and said, oh, can you come and have a word? And he said, great news, you're getting a new dialer. And it's being implemented, we're starting now. There's nothing wrong with the one we had. No one said, what do you want? How can it be made better? And it was because people weren't involved. The people that are actually going to be using it. It was kind of like, I use the analogy of, we were used to flying a single propellered plane. Someone delivered an F-16 and said, right, get on with it. We didn't know what we were doing. We will go out to questions. I posted on LinkedIn to say that I was coming today, and again, because the name is Disrupt, this is a disruptive question. And it was from John Devlin, the CEO of Ascensos. And he said, please ask the panel this question. Does anyone ever claim not to put their people first? It's an overused, throwaway marketing message. I imagine everyone uses this hyperbole, but not many live up to the promise.
What a question. That's brilliant.
Great.
Do you not think?
Yeah.
Oh, right, I better answer it. I think that's brilliant. Well, at the end of the day, yes, you're right, it is overused, but only if you are talking the talk and not walking the walk. And there's always going to be that balance. Regularly we talk about balancing customer, colleague, and cost. And realistically, putting people first, it's like anything. Yes, there will be companies that pay lip service because that's what they do. But those also are the companies that have a shelf life and the ones that aren't going to evolve and grow with time as they go.
And I think the proof is also from things like you've just shared, Emma, around the CEO, because everything happens in relationships. Everything happens in that connection from people to people and going and speaking and saying what do you need.
People will always matter, but people also evolve, as does technology. And what we need to keep doing, no matter what function we work in, we always need to keep that at the forefront, because it's okay bringing all this technology on if we're still leaving people here or not putting people first or not saying people matter. We're never going to get to where we need to be over here.
I think also it kind of takes time. I mean, it depends the size of the company, but working for HSBC Global, and it takes a certain pace to go to there. So they have probably been claiming having a good people strategy a couple of years ago, where we are just kind of arriving to this stage where actually our contact center agent become like a new generation of contact center where they move from handling calls to handling a couple of, chat and answering chats to now being maybe, or having the view to become like a chatbot enhancer or the bot designer. So to arrive to this stage, which is only starting to get in place now, it's been like 4 years journey. So obviously they might have claimed things a little bit beforehand that, we were not like really, like the ambition was there, but it wasn't really, operationally evident that it was the case. So I think it's also like we need to take in consideration the troubles of, organization. I know it's not maybe what we want to hear, but, you have also to manage, the existing technology and human resources and market and things that, will make things go slower than expected, regardless of who team leader you have and leaders, that will share the good ambition that we all want to be there. But yeah, it takes time sometimes to make this happen. So just wanting to balance a little bit, like the fairness of that bigger, maybe organization that can't do it that quickly.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the
Good
panel?
job,
Good.
girls. No question.
I can't actually see.
There is someone at the back there. And at the front.
Jerry Brown, the customer lifeguard. I was curious because, Amy, you mentioned in your presentation about some of the statistics you're using and some of the measurements. Fran certainly mentioned it in terms of not using AHT anymore. And I was curious as to what were the metrics, or what were the biggest changes that you've made in metrics to represent or reflect the types of things you're talking about. So whether that's well-being, whether that's real focus on employee engagement. What are the biggest changes you've made in the metrics that you currently use?
I'm happy to jump in from a purely psychology perspective, and I'm sure it'd be great to hear some very real examples within contact centres. But ultimately, it's trying to move beyond metrics that are purely around a current state to actually looking at the environmental factors and the behavioural factors that can influence the outcome of well-being. So demands, workload, pressure points, psychological safety. There's subjective measures that you can put in place that start to get a read and a temperature of the environment that you're creating for people. Support systems, so this is where the engagement work is fantastic. In the engagement index, tells you a story of how supported people feel. Do people see meaning and purpose at work? So there's a whole world of positive psychology that I didn't spend as much time on talking about today, which is the psychology of how we thrive, the psychology of how we be our best. So there's a couple of examples there which relate to subjective well-being measures that you can survey and measure and start to get a read on and report on then to your organization to make change from. And then the final part is looking at your current data, your real data, but just looking at it in a new lens. We've seen customers make real fundamental change to their working patterns, flexible hours in terms of what they're offering people, purely by joining up subjective measures with actual data of what's happening and how work's being done on shifts and time, the day that people are working to make those changes. But that's more from a psychology perspective.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what everyone's doing.
I mean, we obviously, in our survey, we do twice the engagement survey, and we added in new sections about health and well-being, about inclusion and diversity, so we absolutely ensured people had a voice. But it's really important about ensuring that they can tell us things. And to your point about AHT, I definitely don't. Knowledge is really important to me. People give great service when they're confident, they're knowledgeable. And so I'll measure ASAT, I'll measure knowledge, the wrap time for efficiency, which is, in there. But the AHT, we definitely increased it because we recognize that these calls were more complex. So for planning purposes, we would put in higher measures for that. So we recognize you can't just say, you're all going to be digital coordinators, by the way, stick to that 280 seconds or whatever it was, we've got to go up to 400, and we recognize that. So we made sure that we were fair and we looked at the entire population, not just the sort of the few. to make sure we moved measures in that way. Other than that, it's things like having a voice. A great example, we have a lot of people who maybe celebrate Ramadan, and last year they were all working from home, so it's a brilliant time. They could all celebrate, be around their family all the time. This year they sort of wrote and said, can we do that again? And I said, no, because we have a 50-50 workforce, but you absolutely can work from home in the first week to acclimatise to that, and that was really well appreciated. And I think if they don't have a voice, those sort of things can't get through to you, so you have to know what's important to them. So that's what I'd say, but I hope that helps answer your question.
Any more? James, you're going to have to be my eyes, I'm blind. Here we go, just here.
Hi Martin, Dave Vernon, the Planning Forum, the forum, so I thought I'd just kind of respond to some of those things, not to defend, but to kind of say that actually, you know, what you're talking about is what we are seeing from the enlightened planning teams of people who are entering awards, you know, things like freedom breaks, 100% holiday guarantees, and trying to move away from chasing things like service level. When we talk about that tension between the colleague, the corporate and the customer, is kind of, you know, is it worth stirring up the hornet's nest, cancelling everything to chase an 80-20 service level when we probably entered the day knowing we weren't going to make it anyway, and we're just trying to make a load of tactical changes. So kind of the question from this is kind of, you know, this is a sort of mantra we're trying to give the planning teams. You know, we're challenging around, you know, low shrinkage isn't good shrinkage. You know, high shrinkage isn't bad shrinkage. It's a value of that kind of time away from the customers. The agent needs that time, and it's kind of a value statement saying, is it worth that time off the customer? Are we getting value for that time away? So when we kind of, you know, and there was a question, the guy from the Census saying it's just a word, putting people first. And we've had a really good talk about a really good CEO, but how do we kind of sometimes, it feels like sometimes a lot of these mantras that the planning team or we're trying to implement is coming top down, what we call the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion, which Sarah's heard a lot of the time. How do we challenge that? How do you challenge that? How have you challenged that to kind of get where you are now?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have a combination of Amy's company and Sabio. We actually have the technology to monitor and understand people's mental well-being in almost real time. So we've got that data source. We can understand that. And we can connect, because we talked about two things today. We talked about people, and we actually talked about data quite a lot today. So if we can actually track the general mental wellness of different teams in a contact center and understand those peaks and troughs, we can then start to connect that with other dots that we know and we can see that are happening. So for example, on a Black Friday, if you're retail, you get a pretty busy day, it can get pretty stressful, right? So if on that day we see mental health wellness take a dip and we see call spikes, then we can start to, with some, you know, relative, you know, confidence, say that's a problem. And we haven't quite got the right mix of resource, skills, and people to be able to support that. But, and Amy will tell you this probably better than anybody, is often when we see these dips in mental health from the data, it's often small things that really matter. And for people, a small thing can have a big impact on your mental health. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say everybody's operating, everybody seems pretty happy, your mental health scores are pretty cool. And then there's a communication from the CEO. The CEO talks about something, right? Often, pretty immediately, we see either a spike, because what the CEO said has been well received by the employees. You see that spike. Or you can see, actually, what he said had a detrimental effect. It's only a few words, a sentence, half an hour speech, but it made a really big impact on people. And then what often we do see in the data is that the negative takes longer to come back up than the spike in positive. So hopefully does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, what's the ring?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, imagine everybody has a one-to-one on a particular day.
And it boosts it, yeah. I know we've got another question, but we've been obsessed with productivity for years and years and years, and our systems are built to drive productivity, but often it lacks the human factor of our energy to sustain energy over time. So the data that James has been talking about is, let's combine the energy data, which is how we're feeling, the well-being data, which is a read that you can get a continuous view of, with the more digital, tangible, objective data that is there all the time. And you can start to combine up context with what's happening or how things are happening and how people are feeling, and that tells a story. But most of the time, we're just on those first 2 points without the energy factor. So it's about where's that point of diminishing returns, of pushing people. And it's amazing to hear that that's being thought of within planning, which is just, where do you start to get a boost, actually, from more one-to-ones, more break times, a shift in flexibility and breaks and how people work where they work. And that's the new era that we're now moving into that's possible. So, yeah, interesting.
I would definitely recommend freedom breaks as well. It's one of those things where we, in Skipton, we implemented it a couple of years ago now, and I'm sure you remember, Dave, everyone looked at us like, you are mad. Why are you doing that? And relaxing things like metrics, just to go back to the question earlier, relaxing things like adherence, and this might be a bit controversial, but that's how you end up making real positive change for your people. Okay, so Johnny didn't go on his break at 8:32, he went at 8:34. Okay, but with that 15-minute interval, really, did that make a huge difference? Would Johnny have saved the day? And he might have done, I don't know. But realistically, it's very, very unlikely. And by doing these little things, they do make a huge difference. And sometimes I think people forget that. And it's one of those things that I think I would challenge everybody to look at is, when you're stressed and you're behind your computer or on the phone, you can go off and walk off and have a cup of tea. An agent doesn't always have that, and I think that's wrong.
Was there one more question?
Yeah. Hi, Mark Palmer from WebHelp. I just had a couple of comments followed by a question. First of all, thank you for today, and I think the message of effectiveness rather than productivity comes through really strongly, so thank you for that. It's sort of heartening to hear those words. I work across a lot of industries, so some of them are construction and automotive, and where I guess work is less homogenous in the sense that contact center is quite top down. A lot of the things we're talking about, central planning, central initiatives, the top leader connecting with people, going around, talking to everybody. And I just wondered what the panel thought about the fact that in other industries, frontline manager is probably the deciding factor as to whether a house is built straight or a car is built straight. And those people are extremely well paid in construction and in automotive versus the CX industry. And they therefore do spend a lot of their time coaching, and they make sure therefore that best practice, and perhaps in our own industry that's around empathy building and diagnostics and being very good at handling objections. And I just wonder whether you feel that, and it's certainly my own view, that the quality of the frontline management has gone down over time, that the spans have got stretched, that the people who are promoted into those roles have been put there for the wrong reasons, and that actually perhaps the time has come to look at this bottom up and to have almost a revolution in the capabilities of frontline managers such that they have ownership of a lot of the inputs rather than relying on, departmental initiatives and top-down thinking.
Yeah,
Long
absolutely.
question.
I think for me, because I came into emovis, it's my first time in this industry. I've come from a variety of different backgrounds, but for me, the contact centre has been a massive learning curve. Certainly coming from a bigger organisation to a smaller one where you've got a million ideas that you can't actually run away with. So I've been able to come in with fresh eyes, and where, yes, it was very much top down and still is to an aspect, what we are doing now is involving our our team managers, our operations managers. Actually, do you know what? Our ops director doesn't need to be on that call, because then the people on that call are in a safer environment and can talk about what they want. And that keeps our ops director up here where they need to be, just in case we need to raise anything. And when we started doing that and sort of having more defined lines of management, we're getting brilliant ideas coming through. They're finding it safer to talk to us, certainly to come through to me and my team. Would really like to do this. This is what we'll do. This is how we'll work. Excellent. We'll put it all together to you. Then we'll take it to the very top people that we need to take it to, and we'll take it from there. And the feedback that we're getting is fantastic. So it is about influencing, it's about empowering. And I think sometimes you have got to strip everything back to the very beginning. Certainly we've come out of COVID, people are less engaged, and we have got a shortage of experience in the industry. So what do? Okay, we go out and we talk to people, we get companies to come in who know what they're talking about on mental health and that sort of thing, but also about development. Development is high on our agenda and everyone's agenda, to keep people engaged, to keep that attrition down, but also for the attraction. But it's making sure we're starting it down here this time and feeding it up to the organisation, and that's what we're doing within emovis.
I was just going to add on that, on a slightly different slant, which is around, I felt very passionately about how roles have changed for managers. And, you know, we used to bring in the manager, they were a bit of a supervisor or a manager. And it's so important now we have leaders, particularly with the mental health and well-being of people. And, you know, they really deal with a lot of complexity, the hybrid working, the case studies, the HR team always cut down and you've got to deal with your own knowledge of case studies and everything like that. So I fought passionately, and we've now just increased, along with our digital coordinators, we've increased our team manager banding so that we're bringing in much more experienced leaders rather than just people who perhaps manage and supervise, who can't really deal with complexities that they have to face now. And I think that's something that we have to recognise as an industry as well. I felt very strongly that we had people, now you can train and nurture some of those, and we have, but you just can't recruit the same type that you used to have, leading 15 people, 14 people, 12 people, because they're absolutely their first, you know, engagement with the company. And you've got to bring in proper inspirational leaders as well. So we've done that change now, which I'm really pleased about.
Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you for your time. I think when it comes to putting people first, this panel embody that. So give your hands together for the panel. Thank you very much.